Y'all, the Nintendo Switch 2 is coming out in less than a month. I'm so excited. I'm sorry, I had to let you know. I had to tell you. As you can tell, I'm very excited. I love the Switch. I love video games. I love Nintendo, and I have ever since I was young. So this is big news for me, okay? In honor of the Switch 2 coming out and my failed attempts at getting a pre-order, if you have an extra pre-order, please help your girl out. In honor of that, I figured for today's video, we would talk about all the different trans Nintendo characters that I was able to find. Some of them do have some pretty good trans representation, but some of the other ones don't. They have pretty bad trans representation, to be honest. So for today's video, I would like to show you my favorite trans characters from Nintendo, talk about their representation, and talk about where I think Nintendo went wrong and where I think they went right, or where I think they did well. Some of these characters you're definitely going to be familiar with, but I doubt that you knew that they were trans or even the kind of horrible backstories that they've had, specifically Birdos, who we're going to start with. But before we get into it, I want to let you guys know that my name is Samantha. I post new videos every single week here on my channel where I give you guys my opinion as a trans woman and also as somebody who studied media. So if you guys are not yet subscribed and you would like to be, go ahead and do that right now. Go ahead. If you guys are fans of Nintendo, I do stream Nintendo games over on my Twitch channel every single week. So definitely come over to Twitch and hang out with us and, you know, play some Nintendo games. It's so fun. But yeah, with no further ado, let's talk about Birdo. So Birdo is actually a very fitting first character to talk about because she was Nintendo's very first trans character. Despite this being a step forward in terms of representation qualitatively, it was kind of a step back. It was honestly really, really bad, which sucks because I love Birdo. Who doesn't love Birdo? I am sure you've seen Birdo before. She's very hard to miss. She has the bright pink skin. She's got the big old snout on her face that shoots eggs. She was first seen in Super Mario Bros. 2, which released back in 1998. There's not too much in terms of dialogue for Birdo in this game, but we can look in the manual and find a little bit more about her and about her gender identity. Now, across all the games that we'll look at today, you'll notice that different versions of the game are often released for different, areas, like different countries. And they each make unique choices about the dialogue and the content that they want to keep in the game. Some regions chose to omit the trans commentary altogether. Some chose to kind of tone it down a bit, and some chose to amp it up. In the manual from this first Super Mario Bros. 2 game, Birdo's description says, he thinks he's a girl and spits eggs from his mouth, and he'd rather be called Birdetta. The Japanese version is very similar, and it says, Birdo thinks they're a girl and spits eggs from their mouth. But the Japanese version did, for some reason, switch her name from Birdetta to Catherine. By the way, Birdo has like the most extensive history for Nintendo for the characters that we're gonna be talking about today. So she is gonna have the most content that we talk about. Some of the other examples don't have as many trans references, but they really went in with her. They really went in with Birdo. I don't really know exactly why they chose to go with Catherine for the Japanese version of the game, but in Japan, they also did have a commercial that released only in Japan with Catherine, Birdo, which is just, it's so weird. It's just so, it's so weird. It featured Catherine looking particularly provocative, and for the first time, we could hear Birdo's voice.
おっと、アメリカでは売れっ子だったのよ。今度は日本のお友達を優しく遊ばせてあげるわ。
アメリカ帰りのファミコンソフトスーパーマリオ USA
できちゃった。
I have a lot of thoughts. I have a lot of thoughts on all of the representation and stereotyping and everything that's going on for Birdo, but let me tell you all of the different references that are made to Birdo's transness before I give you my final thoughts, because I want to lay it all out for you, okay? At least in Japan, they had a very clear vision of who they wanted Birdo to be, the stereotypes that they wanted to, place onto Birdo. You can see she's very over-sexualized. You can even hear in her voice, she has a very, I don't know how to say it, but like a very stereotypically trans woman voice. You know what I mean? It sounds very flamboyant. You can tell that they're born male. And I mean, if you know, you know. There's a trans voice, and I'm not going to say anything else on it. She has a trans voice. So do I. It's fine. We don't care. There was also the 1996 Super Mario RPG where Birdo played another villain yet again, but we get more dialogue for her. We get more interactions between her and the other players, the other characters in the game. Through the dialogue, we can see that she's depicted as very lonely, very desperate, and very flirtatious, even though her flirtation is wholly unreciprocated, wholly unwanted. Again, just like the original game that Birdo was in, there were multiple versions that released in different countries. And once again, Japan's version of Birdo was much more sexual, much more flirtatious, and much more stereotyped. After taking some damage in the battle, because like I said, she's an enemy, she'll say, "Ouch, you're hurting me. Now it's my turn. Get it while it's hot." So, pretty tame, whatever. But then in the Japanese version, she'll say, "Hi," with a heart. I'm Catherine. You can call me Kathy with another heart. And then again, after taking damage in the battle, she'll go, please finish me yourself. And hee, don't fight so hard. You're the lonely type too, aren't you? Fine, I'll give you my hot egg. What? What is going on? Now, these games did come out. The first one was the late 80s, the second one in the 90s. There was definitely a big stereotype for gay people and for trans people throughout the media that, I mean, if you watched any movies back then or any shows back then, I'm sure you'd be familiar with. It's the exact stereotype that they're placing on Birdo. It's this over-sexualized, over-flirtatious version of a trans person or even of a gay person, because I don't know if they know the difference at this point, that really just comes off as a drag queen trying to make a joke out of, you know, being sexual. She's also depicted, firstly in this game, but then we'll see again in some other games, as being very boy obsessed and like very boy crazy, which again is another one of those stereotypes that people have placed on trans and gay people. The dialogue from Birdo after being literally like beaten up from Mario and his friends is, oh, I'm never gonna let you go. You're just too cute. Like, girl, let it move on. Like, he doesn't want you. That's the English version. The Japanese version says, I'm the one for you. Don't forget about me. This was definitely not Birdo's best appearance, but again, it wasn't her worst either. It does get worse. A similar characterization of Birdo as being this very stereotyped version of a trans person was present in the Game Boy Advance version of the Mario and Luigi roleplay game, RPG, as well. In this game, she plays an accomplice of a villain named Popple. Popple. What the kind of name is Popple? Sorry. But once again, she's portrayed as boy crazy, over flirtatious, and honestly, a bit delusional. She keeps referring to the villain as a darling, even when he is responding like, don't call me darling, like I'm not your darling freak. Like, she doesn't say freak, but that's the vibe. He's very clearly uncomfortable. The worst part of the game for me though was when Popple and Birdo were interacting. First of all, Popple, I don't even know his name anyway. He hesitates before calling her a dame. He's like, this dame, question mark? Like, this lady, question mark? Are you a girl? When he's like, oh, this is my sidekick Birdo. She goes, no, don't call me Birdo, call me Birdie. To which he angrily replies, I don't care about names. I bet he doesn't use pronouns either, right? Birdo doesn't have any voice acting in this game, but let's go back to her voice for a second because she does have voice actors many different times throughout her journey. The next time that we hear Birdo's voice, like acted out by a real life person, is in the Super Mario Bros. Super Mario USA, which is described as a semi-sequel that released on something called the Satellaview. I've never heard of the Satellaview, but apparently it existed. In this game, there's actually 3 different Birdos, and all of them are voiced by New Half, which is a Japanese slang term. I think it's kind of outdated for trans women, but when you listen to a clip of the 3 Birdos talking, no shade, again, but it's very clear that the developers were going for a specific sound or a specific voice.
1個でいるなんて嫌よ。
今度こそそのお城をいただくわよ。
そうよ、覚悟なさい。チュルゲ、やってしまいなさい。俺に命令するなっての。
There were some other games that came out a little later, like Mario Tennis and Super Mario Advance, that dropped the whole trans voice gag, and they actually had cis women voicing Birdo in these games. Fun fact, in Super Mario Advance, Birdo is actually voiced by the same voice actor that voices Peach and Toad. How cute. I guess she was just really into her voice training at that time, right? Birdo eventually does end up being voiced by the same person that voices Yoshi, which seems fitting, right? And in a very similar fashion to her voice just magically changing, she kind of magically just is no longer trans. Like, the trans aspect of her identity is kind of just ignored at a certain point, but not before we get the craziest example by far of any trans person in a video game I've ever seen. And I'm talking about her appearance in the Captain Rainbow game. There were a few more small examples, like in Super Smash Bros. Melee and Super Smash Bros. Brawl. They each had like a little trophy for Birdo that said that she thinks she's a girl, but she's really a boy. And even in a later Mario Tennis game, we see Birdo kind of being used as the joke to a punchline. Bowser's trying to get a kiss from Peach and she doesn't want to do it, so she makes Birdo do it, and then like Bowser like throws up or something, he's like grossed out. It's very reminiscent of the scenes from Jerry Springer where trans women would go on and say, I'm trans, and you would see their boyfriends like throwing up or getting physical against them even. But honestly, those are nothing compared to the storyline in the Captain Rainbow video game. She gets arrested for going in the women's bathroom. In this game, Captain Rainbow, which released in Japan only, where we see this over-sexualization of Birdo, right? Birdo is once again depicted in a very stereotypical, flamboyant way, and she has that same feminine but male voice. And when we find her, she's already been locked in a cage, And you find out that a robot cop has arrested her because it detected that she's not really a woman. Actually, I believe more specifically, it called her a bundle of XY chromosomes. I'm sorry, I need to go. This came out on the Wii. This was not that long ago. And this was before the first American bathroom bill. I was like, did Nintendo cause all this? Nintendo, what have you done? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But Nintendo, like what? If that's not crazy enough though, your job for this mission with Birdo is to prove to the robot cop that she is really a woman. And to do this, you go into her very cute, very pink house and find an item that proves her womanhood. Said item you find under her pillow, and it's buzzing away, vibrating away, if you will. My God, yes, you find her special intimate toy and you bring it back to this robot cop. And I found Birdo's toy, she's a woman. How is this real life? And how does that prove you're a woman? First of all, life hack to prove you're a woman, just buy a, never mind. And to top off her Captain Rainbow appearance, once she is free, she thanks you by saying, "You're my boyfriend now." Going again with this boy crazy theme. And then she blows you a kiss that looks like it hurts you. So yeah. Needless to say, Birdo has had quite a journey with Nintendo. Quite the journey with Nintendo. Her transness really hasn't been mentioned too much as of recently, but honestly, maybe it's for the best. This representation of a trans identity is really bad, dinosaur or not. It's pretty obvious that Birdo, from the beginning, was designed to be a mockery of trans people, or a mockery of what Nintendo thought trans people were. From the very first game, right before she even spoke, the developers were already extremely dismissive of Birdo's trans identity, right? I know she's a fictional character and it's not that serious, but let me just stick with me, okay? Before she even spoke, the developers were saying he thinks he's a girl and he'd rather be called Birdetta, but then still calling her him, still using the name Birdo. What does that in itself teach the audience, right? That if a trans person says that they would rather be referred to as a different name or use different pronouns, that you can just ignore them, right? They're just crazy. You can call them whatever you want. It sends a very dismissive message about trans identities to readers and to players. Additionally, in nearly every single game she's in, every aspect about her has been stereotyped. From the way she's dressed, she has a little frilly pink bow on, she's got long eyelashes. Her voice was consistently this flamboyant gay voice. There's no such thing as a gay voice. Let me just say that, but you know what I mean, right? There's a stereotype of a gay voice and they used it. Even the words that she chooses to use and her behavior are stereotyped, which is really unfortunate. When you design trans characters to be laughed at and mocked and ridiculed, it's planting seeds in players' minds that trans identities are comical and that there's something to be laughed at or ridiculed. A lot of times, video games and you're playing and you're beating bosses and you're solving puzzles and stuff like that, they create a dopamine release in your brain. And when you're beating up a trans person and laughing at them and mocking them and then get a hit of dopamine in your brain, it literally trains your brain to laugh at trans people. Also the issue of the boy crazy narrative, right? Granted, these games aren't necessarily connecting Birdo's transness to her boy craziness, so they're kind of off the hook, but I do just want to really clearly separate these two. There's a very common misconception that trans people transition for male approval or for, romantic approval in any sense. Let me just say, unequivocally, that is not the case. Trans people transition to feel more aligned with their own inner sense of self, their own gender identity, not to appease anybody else, right? At least they shouldn't. If they are, I'd like to chat. For their own happiness, I swear. Overall, I told you guys there's a lot to talk about for Birdo, but I do love Birdo. Regardless of the fact that she has been, over-stereotyped and low-key was designed to mock trans people, I still do love her. I named my dog Birdie literally after Birdo in honor of her forgotten trans identity. But just being real, this representation is horrible. It's horrible. We can be positive and be like, maybe it was their genuine attempt at representation for trans people. For me, this character definitely missed the mark. Making fun of my girl for not being able to lay eggs? That is so messed up. Speaking of egg-laying dinosaurs though, some people have actually theorized that Yoshi is trans. Yoshi is the adorable green monster that we all know and love. He first appeared in Super Mario World that released in 1990. And well, I mean, first let's start with the eggs example because that's how I kind of introduced him. So follow me on this logic, right? If Birdo was born male and cannot lay eggs, but rather can only spit them out, and if Yoshi is the same or a very similar species as Birdo, and he can lay eggs, does that mean that Yoshi is biologically female? I'm sorry, this is so stupid. And also it's a very binary view of sex and Yoshi, but it's a little suspicious, right? That's actually the only example that I have for Yoshi. I told you Birdo was the longest one, Yoshi right on through. Upon looking into this a little bit more, I did find that Nintendo has actually spoken about Yoshi's gender, or rather his sex. They said that Yoshi as a species, right? Because Yoshi is both an individual's name and the name of a species. Yoshi as a species are asexual creatures, meaning that they're neither male nor female. So if you're not assigned a sex at birth, can you really be trans? I don't know. Also, yes, I am referring to asexual in the biological sense, not the romantic or sexual sense, which means that you're just like, you don't feel attraction to other people. Anyways, so yeah, I think that unfortunately that does mean that Yoshi is not trans. I wish he was, but fortunately for us, the next character that we're going to be talking about has been confirmed to be trans. Madeline from a game called Celeste. Madeline is a young girl who sets out on a journey to climb a magical mountain called Celeste Mountain, not just for the challenge, but to face some deeper struggles that she has going on. In the game, she deals with panic attacks and self-doubt and a darker version of herself that tries to stop her progress. Overall, the game has very strong themes of self-acceptance and self-preservation, and a lot of people like it. It's a fun-looking game. Now, while the story does not explicitly mention her transness or gender dysphoria as one of the struggles that she's dealing with internally, there are a few hints to indicate to players that she is trans. Not only is there that prominent imagery with the darker self that I mentioned, who comes from Madeline's reflection and has a lot to say about Madeline's appearance, but we can also see a trans flag next to a rainbow flag on Madeline's desk, and also a pill bottle, which some players have theorized are confirmation of Madeline's being on HRT. The pill bottle and the flags and even the imagery are honestly a little bit too subtle for me to confirm or deny that Madeline is trans, but we also literally have a post from the developer saying, yes, she's trans. Maddie Thorson, who wrote Celeste, said in a response to being asked if Madeline is canonically trans, well, yeah, of course she is. This feels obvious to a lot of people, and likewise, it feels painfully obvious to me too in retrospect. These are things that I was not aware of during the development of Celeste, where I was writing Madeline and speaking from her perspective. Creating Celeste with my friends helped me reach the point where I could realize this truth about myself. During Celeste's development, I did not know that Madeline or myself were trans. During the Farewell DLC's development, I began to form a hunch. Post-development, I now know that we both are. GLAAD actually has released a gaming report and found that 72% of LGBTQ gamers say that seeing characters with their gender identity or sexual orientation represented well makes them feel better about themselves. So we know that representation in video games matters and helps people and helps trans youth, but now we know that it also helps trans developers as well. But now when it comes to the conversation and the question around should Madeline's transness have been more explicit in the game, I do think that there is definitely a balance between getting in some trans exposure and maintaining the character's privacy / just like the gameplay of the game. Nobody wants to play a game that feels like a trans documentary. So, shoving in trans storyline and shoving in trans dialogue throughout the whole game is not the answer. However, too little can also lead to Madeline's transness being overlooked and the potential benefits of having representation in a game be missed. Maddie Thorson, that developer, did actually address this as well and said, maybe she was trans, but that it really wasn't any of ours or the player's business. We considered what harm we would be doing by signaling to players that they are entitled to know whether she is trans. She's a woman, a human being, and that's all we need to know until she decides that she wants to tell us more. She didn't strike us as a person who would publicly identify as trans, certainly not before the events of the main game. We felt that hints like those in the farewell ending sequence would be more appropriate for her character. I feel conflicted even now writing this, effectively outing her, because it doesn't feel entirely fair to her. It's the same consideration that I would want to be shown to me. Okay. I guess that's somewhat understandable, right? In real life, Nobody is entitled to knowing a trans person's trans history or their trans identity. Trans people should not be forced to be out and open about their trans identity, especially in a world that looks like ours, where trans people are constantly ridiculed and harassed. However, Madeline's not real. It's a video game character. And so these reasons for not disclosing her transness are kind of nullified to me. She doesn't need to maintain her safety. She's not real. And she wouldn't even need to disclose her identity in the storyline of the game. You could even write into the storyline that she doesn't tell people, that she doesn't want to be open about her trans identity for whatever reason. It could be something that only the player has access to, kind of like we saw in Super Mario Bros. 2, where they like gave us that additional description of Birdo saying that he used to, like he thinks he's a girl or something like that. Make it better than that one, but there are options other than having a whole like, I'm trans character, you know? To me, this decision unfortunately just feels a little bit retroactive. It unfortunately really seems to me like the developers saw that people were like picking up Madeline as a trans storyline or as a trans hero and kind of threw it in there at the end. While that's not like the worst thing in the world, I don't mind it necessarily. Having characters that are designed to tell trans stories is much more beneficial than throwing a trans label on a character whose journey with gender is very limited and really not noted at all throughout the game. Moral of the story, it's kind of cool that she's trans, but it doesn't really do anything for us. But fear not, because there is one more trans character that I want to talk to you guys about who was represented in a really, really great way. Before we talk about her though, I do have one more honorable mention that I want to talk about. Samus. You guys know Samus, don't you? Samus Aran is a powerful armored bounty hunter from the Metroid video game series, known for her advanced power suit, exceptional combat skills, and silent determination as she battles space pirates and alien threats across the galaxy. Samus's trans storyline derived from the original Metroid game, where Samus is the main character and throughout the entire game is presumed to be male. You only see her in this super armored, genderless suit. Her manual description uses male pronouns, and even the dialogue that she has throughout the entire game avoids using any gendered pronouns, so that when you get to the very end of the game, if you complete it in a short enough amount of time, you get this grand reveal that the character that you've been playing with this whole time is actually a woman with long blonde hair and a little bikini. She's so slay. There was another interview that people kind of take as confirmation of her transness that came out in, I believe, 1995. It was in a Japanese released only Super Metroid strategy guide. And in it, the developers of the game were all asked if they had one secret to share about Samus. And one of these developers said, Samus isn't a woman, she's a new half. Again, it's that slang term for trans woman that is outdated now. We don't really use that term. At least if you're a trans woman in Japan, tell us about that term down below, please. But yeah, this portrayal of Samus has been somewhat debunked, and a lot of fans don't really think it's true. Personally, I don't think that she is meant to be trans or was written as trans. I don't think they really thought it through that much. If you think about it, the shock factor of somebody who you thought was male coming out as trans is just as high as the shock factor of somebody who you thought was male coming out as a hot girl, right? Same thing, honestly. It's been reported that the development team had a sort of last minute idea where they said, okay, wouldn't it be cool if at the very end, Samus was revealed to be a woman? And I honestly think that's as much thought as they put into it. I think that the comment from the developer was honestly, and I'm not trying to like attack him or anything, I think it was honestly just a misogynistic / transphobic joke. She's definitely built in a more warrior, masculine way than some of the other Nintendo women. And I think that was really the only reason for them saying that she was a trans person, right? That she was a new half, because she looked more masculine. And if anything, that just shows how transphobia affects more than just trans people. It affects cisgender women as well. They get called men or trans for, you know, having a natural female body. Maybe Samus's wasn't a natural female body, but you know what I'm saying, okay? You get what I'm saying. Okay, but now we're moving on to our very last trans character for today, and arguably the best representation of them all. Vivian, darling. Sorry, I'm literally the stereotype that they're trying to make. Anyways, Vivian was first introduced in the 2004 Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, where she's originally an enemy until you convert her to be on Mario's side. Her representation is the most interesting out of all the characters that we've talked about today, because it originally wasn't as great as it is now. She, like Birdo, was originally written to be trans, but in some of the versions that came out, her transness was scrapped. And in the versions that did come out that did mention her transness, it was kind of poorly done. To be specific, there are 3 moments that mention Vivian's transness: her description in the game, an interaction with a side character, and an interaction with her sisters. In her description, which comes from Mario's sidekick, we see the very same dismissive language that was used for Birdo. The Japanese version says, Vivian was a part of the dark trio. He may look like a girl, but is actually a boy. Other versions say he pretends to be a girl, but is actually a boy. From a trans perspective, we're not pretending to be anything. Like my trans identity, my trans womanhood is the most authentic version of myself. It's kind of hard to understand this when you're not trans yourself. So the easiest way for me to describe what I mean to you guys is by breaking down the difference between gender, or like being a man and woman, and sex, which is being male or female. The logic that the game uses is that if you are born male, you are a boy, and that's it. For most people, this is the case, right? Their internal sense of self does match the gender that corresponds to the sex that they were assigned at birth, but for trans people, that's not the case. I'm a trans woman, meaning I was born male, but my internal sense of self, my internal sense of gender is a woman. That doesn't mean that I am pretending. That doesn't mean that I'm actually something else. It just means that I'm trans. Describing Vivian as a boy who pretends to be a girl or a boy who is actually a girl is incredibly dismissive to trans people's identities and the pain that we often go through trying to figure out who we are. We don't know why trans people are trans, but we do know that we're trans. We do know that we're people, and that should be enough to deserve respect. The one translation that I was kind of okay with for Vivian's description, I should clarify okay, was the Italian version, which read, she used to be a man. I know it's crazy, but now she's a woman and proud of it. I will say not all trans people are okay with the phrasing of used to be a man, or I would say that most trans people are not okay with that phrasing. Gender identity is innate and unchanging, meaning that for me, even though I came out at 17 or 18 and transitioned then, I have always been a trans woman. I've always been trans. I've always had this internal sense of self that is a woman. However, for me, I do sometimes say like when I was a little boy or like I was born a boy or whatever, because I don't know, I just think that's the experience that I had. You know, I was raised as a little boy. That was the way that I interacted with the world for a long time. So that's just like how I address my younger self. But I do believe that my transness was always there, whether or not I recognized it. And that's also a personal preference, right? Trans people are not a monolith. Trans people all have different preferences and different understandings of their identity. That's just kind of what works for me. The next example of Vivian's transness is, oh my God, a giant fucking ant just walked across my screen. Oh my God, I gotta go. The next example is an interaction Vivian has with a side character, Goom Goom, who's looking for a girlfriend. Goom Goom, when offered Vivian as a girlfriend, says, whoa, you sure are cute, but what's going on with you? You're a guy, right? I don't want guys. Oh my God, like my guy. We've talked about this before on my channel. You don't have to date trans people, but you don't have to be rude about it. Okay, you just don't. That in Goom Goom's defense, so that is his whole gag. He does reject everybody with like some random excuse, so whatever. But I will say that the English version of this game did remove that sequence. So clearly somebody thought it was a little problematic, right? But now the third example, and then I'll tell you about the remake and how they've redeemed themselves, is a conversation that Vivian has with her sisters. I mentioned earlier that Vivian starts out as an enemy, and what I didn't mention is she's part of this little trio group with her two sisters. In the game, Vivian's sister Beldam introduces the trio and says, we are the three shadow ... and then Vivian finishes her sentence and says, sisters, we're the three shadow sisters. Beldam, the sister, snaps back to Vivian and says, what did you just say? We're the shadow trio. Where are these sisters? Aren't you a man? Sister. Brutal. Vivian apologizes for this, and then Beldam says that she's in for a punishing for referring to herself as a girl. Not cute. Not cute, Beldam. I have a few thoughts on this, okay? Obviously, the dialogue is not great. This is straight up Beldam bullying Vivian for her gender identity, you know, rejecting her trans identity, all the above. It's not good. That's not how you should talk to trans people. However, if you really look closely, this scene is a lot different than the scenes with Birdo. In the scenes with Birdo, her being mocked is used as comedic relief. But in this game, Vivian being mocked is used as a way to show that her sisters are mean and evil and to help us gain sympathy for Vivian. It's really meant to make us feel bad for her. After this scene, Vivian says that she has finally had enough of her sisters and decides to leave them and join Mario's team. And it's just so cute. You know, Mario's team never misgenders her, never calls her a man, and she lives happily ever after. It's great. Granted, these scenes aren't perfect, right? The dialogue surrounding Vivian is still pretty dismissive of her trans identity, but it's definitely better than the Birdo representation, right? The lesson that it's teaching players is not that trans people are funny or that being trans is comedic. It's that, well, I don't know, that your sister will not want to be part of your family if you're mean to her, or like the effects of rejecting a trans person's identity. I don't know, you tell me what it means. But it's definitely a lot better than Birdos, and we haven't even talked about the remaster yet. The game was re-released in 2024, and the whole trans arc is completely different. Vivian's description in the game was updated to say, the youngest of 3 shadows, she's so cute, she could infatuate anyone. Vivian was one of the 3 shadows, but has now chosen to leave her 2 sisters behind, completely removing the part about her pretending to be a girl or having used to be a man. The scene with Goom Goom, I can't not laugh at Goom Goom, but the scene with him is replaced as well. So now, though he still rejects her, it's because she's too goth, not too trans. Then best of all, the scene with her sisters it's really great. It's really, really great. The dialogue from her sister calling her a man was cut. Vivian now says to Mario after joining their team, truth is, it took me a while to realize I was their sister, not their brother. Now, their usual bullying feels heavier. Yes, excellent. While I do think that the original dialogue from her sister made a good point about the effects of bullying, it ultimately could have been hurtful for trans people, and due to the fact that this is a kids game, like a family game, I do understand them removing the dialogue, but I'm very, very glad that instead of just removing the trans arc altogether, they've made it more family friendly and actually better representation for trans people. She doesn't say that she used to be a man and now she's proud, or that she thinks that she's a girl or whatever. She says, it took me a while to realize who I really am. Their sister, not their brother. That is how most trans people think about their identities, right? It's not something that we decide one day, it's something that we realize about ourselves. And the little part with Mario blushing when she kisses him, I'm gonna cry, stop. I'm so glad that there was at least one good trans Mario character, and honestly, I'm really hopeful for the future of maybe Birdo. Maybe they'll bring her back and change her little storylines around a little bit to make her a better representation for trans people as well. Nintendo, I love you. If you want to talk about trans representation, let's chat. I'll help you out. But yeah, other than that, I think I'm gonna go. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye everyone.